let's go now to Skype. And our first guest is Barry Sullivan. And you all may know Barry Sullivan. He has been a part of our work, especially down in Florida. He was one of the speakers at our recent Phyllis Schlafly Eagles event in Naples, Florida. He has his own history as a pro-life leader, very personal to him. And he ran for Congress in 1990. Barry, you'll be happy to know that Phyllis used to say one of the most important things that she did was run for Congress and lose, because you learn how it works. And I did the same thing, she used to like to tell me. And he's been over 30 years, he's been speaking on pro-life issues and active in his church. And as he quoted, he said to us, he was raised in an Orthodox activist Catholic family where knowing and defending and sharing the faith was a requirement, not just an option. Of course, he's the son of Kathleen Sullivan, who was one of Phyllis Schlafly's great friends and continues to be our Florida leader and one of the leaders of our Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and one of the founders of RNC for Life, which we'll talk about more during this week. So welcome, Barry. How are you? I can hear you great. Yeah, thanks. You look great. You look younger. You're looking good. Hey, so Barry, two questions I'm asking everybody that comes through. Number one is, after 3.5 years, the Trump-Pence administration, what is your favorite Trump promise kept that these years he did, policy issue?
As far as it being legal up to the moment of birth and the Democrats supporting that, pushing adoption and other things. And he did it throughout the campaign, and I know Phyllis had a lot to do with that, but I remember listening to Bush's and McCain and Romney, and when I ran for Congress, the quote-unquote 3 pro-life people that I ran against would always say, I'm against abortion except for rape, incest, and life of the mother, next question. In other words, they were ashamed of the issue. And for 30 years I've been saying, if people really knew how bad it was, they would be horrified and we would win people over. Now, that's not the reason we stand up for it, but that is a fact. And I think President Trump, every time I listen to him, he educates more and more people, and he makes it cool, if you want to use a term we used when I was young, to stand up for the unborn. It's not a throwaway line at the end of a debate where they hope, you can tell the candidate hopes he's not asked any more questions. Yeah. And that has just meant the world to me. That's
and you know, Barry, thank you for that. And the other night in, I think, Minnesota, the president was at a rally, and I think the teleprompter was out, and so he went to just telling stories, and he didn't have any real speech to follow at all. One of the things he said was, you know, the governor of Virginia had this conversation where he said, if a baby's born after an abortion that's alive, we'll put it to the side and we'll decide what to do with it. And the media ran around and said, fact check, that's not what Governor Northam said. Well, we've heard the audio tape of Governor Northam. He's on a radio interview. He said that. And, you know, Barry, here's another question for you. We're talking about Barry Sullivan. And you know, a lot of families, you'd be one that would come in mind, would come out of backgrounds that would be a lot of Democrats, right? A lot of our families were union households and all. And just in the last 6 months, the last Democrat in the United States House who was pro-life, Dan Lipinski from up in the Chicago area, he was beaten in a primary by a candidate who was backed by AOC and Pelosi because he was pro-life. And, you know, the people say the parties have changed and all. The biggest change, I would say, in the last 15 or 20 years, there's no such thing as a pro-life Democrat. You know, Joe Biden is not, he ran for office in the 1970s and was moderate on the life issue and all. There's no such thing as a pro-life Democrat anymore. What are your observations on that, Barry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I live in Maryland, and I run into people at the Catholic church I go to and in other instances, and when they tell me they're a Democrat, I just ask them straight out, at your final judgment, do you think the Lord's going to say, okay, you were okay with killing babies because the tax policy or the immigration policy was something that you liked? And again, if we go back to Nazi Germany, the people said Hitler, besides killing Jews, he really got the economy going again. It was that one issue that made him a tyrant and the devil for generations. And if anybody said, well, I supported Hitler, even though because I didn't want to be a one-issue voter, they would be ostracized. And yet, when it comes to us, then we're single issue voters. And one thing before you go on, I want to congratulate you on your comments on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It almost made me ill watching even Fox News making it sound like she was Mother Teresa with everything she did. Well, the fact is she was appointed in 1993. 30 million unborn children were killed under her watch, and she supported that. Gay marriage became a reality in America, and the transgenderism just passed.
Right.
So if anything, and I don't wish that she's in hell or anything, but unborn children have more of a chance at life now that she's gone.
Well, I think, Barry, as you say, I mean, I don't speak, as you say, I don't speak about her soul. I hope I don't know her. All these stories of friendship, but we also recognize people by the fruits of what they did. And starting in the 1970s, she was an architect of the effort to have abortion as a right that people could call upon the government. And then she was part of the people that left, right, and center that fell for the idea that we could allow this in our country. So good point. Barry, last question for you. We're asking everybody, we're having this Eagle Countdown. It's this gathering together strategy session. We are listing what's gone on for the last 3.5 years, why it's important. We don't want to forget what happened as we listen to the media pound on us on a coronavirus count or whatever. But we want to listen to but we also want to say, what do we do? You've been in the trenches. You've been a pro-life fighter in the trenches, been a candidate. The second question I ask everybody is, how should people that are listening, they're in here from all over the country, and they're saying, what do I do now? Right now, 43 days from the election, Barry, what do you think people should be doing? What's your recommendation, actions they can take?
Yeah, the number one thing I find is put stuff on your social media pages and ask questions. For instance, I always ask people, did you know that abortion's legal through the moment of birth? Did you know you can get an abortion without your parents' permission? Because nobody should get mad at you for asking them a question about those kind of things, as opposed to tell them you're going to hell if you support abortion. But there's still tons of people who don't know what the law is. So I tell people, everybody that is a friend of yours, follows you or whatever, should know what abortion, the situation is, and that you're pro-life. And that means you put things like Father Pavone's stuff on your Facebook page. It doesn't have to be the only things you put on, but those are the things. Everybody in your circle should know what the situation is and what they support. I also ask them about the transgenderism. Would you like your daughter having to compete against males, because that's the law of the land now? And you have to ask these questions. And I tell them, if you don't believe me, call the Democratic Party and ask them if they support that. And then call me back. And nobody's ever called me back. But when you ask them, tell them to use the source that they're supposedly following, they can't really get mad at you, or they can get mad at you, but they can't really say he's being unfair because he's telling me to check with the Democratic Party.
Gotcha.
That's the most important thing. And you have to, everybody just bring it up. Did you know that abortion's legal to the moment of birth? In our county, we, and I go to it, the clinic very often, we have Carhart late-term abortions up to the moment of birth. And we've lost women, to the hospital. About probably once a month, somebody goes to the hospital and people have died. Everybody who should know the situation. And if that costs you a few friends, just think of Christ and think of the 10 apostles. They all, 10 of them got martyred. So when people say, well, I don't want to get upset people, you're not a Christian if that's your philosophy when all these people, all these unborn children are getting killed.
Well, thank you, Barry. Thanks for taking the time today, Barry Sullivan, and we really appreciate it, and especially the voice of somebody who's in the trenches like you are, and comes from good bloodlines too. Kathleen Sullivan, of course, is one of our great Eagle leaders. I'm going to let you go, Barry, because we're actually going to bring on our aforementioned Father Frank Pavone to also talk here. Again, we're in the Eagle Countdown, everybody.